Alrighty, welcome back to another exotic rating. Today we'll be going over Rat King, and if you're new here, we're basically going to be going over every exotic and then rating it on a scale of 1 through 10. There will be a build that will explain, if there is one, that will help kind of boost up the rating a little bit. Not excessively, but I feel like you should run it if you're going to be running this weapon. And we'll be going over control, survival, strikes, nightfalls. I will add a little bit of a raid input if I think it is necessary, and we will be running Gambit. And we'll be rating that on again from a scale of a 1 to a 10, and any builds and any abilities that I would recommend, I will be listing them. With that being said, once again, we'll be going over Rat King. The subclass I was using was Void, and I'll put it on screen of what I was running. You don't have to run this, but I think that this is honestly the perfect kind of way to run Rat King, especially since you are getting that invisibility each time you get a kill and reload. It is going to help a lot. And I was also running Graviton Forfeit. Graviton Forfeit, if you didn't know, the longer you're invisible, the faster your melee comes back, faster reload, and faster recovery times as well. There also is a little hidden perk with Graviton Forfeit that I don't think a lot of people know about, and it is the longer you are invisible next to enemies, the faster that your melee ability will recharge. So if you are invisible and next to around like 3 to 4 enemies, you will pretty much always get that melee ability right back, if not very close. And I could show pretty much video evidence, but that'll be for a later date. Lastly, any mods that I'm going to be putting down, mostly is just sidearm mods. There isn't really any unstoppable barriers or overload mods for sidearms this season, and if there was, I definitely would run that for any higher difficulty where you'd be seeing any champions, but for now, we won't be seeing those, so we're gonna just stick with the basics. Alrighty, now the intro is out of the way. We're gonna be starting on the actual rating system, and we're gonna be starting with control, and I'll be giving Rat King a rating of a 6. Now, the reasoning behind giving it a 6 is mostly just because Rat King is more of a team-based kind of weapon to be running. I do not have the Masterwork, so I can't really precisely know exactly how it's going to run. I will say that it might bump it up a little bit. It might bump it to like a 6.5 or a 7 if I did have the Masterwork, but just you really have to run it with a bunch of teams to really get the maximum output for it. And in control, you can run it a little bit better, but I'm going to strictly just be going off of a solo input. If I did have a team, I would be probably giving it a higher rating, but since I'm a solo player, I'll be rating this pretty much as a solo player all around the board, and a lot of legendary sidearms can compete with it, and not to mention, you do have a lot of struggle against like that mid-range fights with other auto rifle pulses and other things where you're just pretty much getting killed first before you can even do enough damage. Not to mention when it comes to close range fighting, most of the time you're going to be losing against shotguns, even spread, slug shotguns, fusion rifles. Pretty much a lot of the close range fighting, you're all going to die first, and you're kind of taking up an exotic slot for a sidearm you could be running that's pretty much legendary. Now, the reason why it is getting a 6 and not a 5 for being kind of average when it comes to this is mostly just because of the perk of being able to get a kill, reload, and then go invisible. And it really helps a lot because instead of using your dodge ability or your melee, you're able to frankly just get a kill and reload and then go invisible and either run away or go and flank another team member on the other team, and it just kind of helps a lot with that potential. However, when it comes to PvP comp, I was running survival. This is going to bump down to a 4. Now, the reasoning of giving this below a 5 is mostly just because in a 3v3 aspect, you are going to be running against a lot of more people that are going to be flanking and really push heavy, and with Rat King, it's really hard to predict, for one, which map you're going to be on, and for two, how they're going to play. Depending upon how they play, you can do really well if they kind of stick to like short range, but they don't have any fusion rifles and mostly just shotguns. But there's also the aspect of where if it's a long range map, you are pretty much hitting for fucking 2 when it comes to long range fights. Another problem when it comes to PvP comp is, again, the same thing with Control, where they're running fusion rifles, they are running slug shotguns, and you are just barely getting outranged by those fusion rifles, and slug shotguns have the one-shot capability, and you of course don't, unless you are running a shotgun, which I was running it in some of these matches. But that just means you're really close heavy, and a lot of people aren't going to be able to run that and don't really like running too close range weapons. Now, to reiterate again, you can be running legendary sidearms that can do pretty much the same job as Rat King, if not better, and that is also going to bump it down a little bit. It's not going to get quite a 3 just because there is some room to improve and to really actually have Rat King shine, as in this match. It wasn't really bad, but it just wasn't good overall to give it anything below average. And then, now since we got over all the PvP side, we'll be going over PvE, and that's going to be starting with Shrike Playlist, and I'll be giving it a rating of a 7. Now, the reasoning behind this rating is, for one, its mag size is really small comparative to other weapons you could be running. Even in some sidearms, sidearms are going to be a little bit more. I can see some sidearms being up to around 20, and you're actually able to put on mods to kind of counteract any small mag size. That being said, it's not very detriment to have a small mag size, especially with the perk of being able to, again, reload and get invisible. And Graviton really shines through here just because, well, I explained the perk pool, and it's just really nice because you can reload and then be able to reload other weapons, recover right away, and once again, if you're closer to more enemies, your melee is going to be coming back way faster. Now, another problem I have with it is mostly just because of the recoil bounce. Then again, the masterwork does help this a little bit, and I do not have it, but it just seems a little excessive when I can only hit body shots most of the time with it. There are some times where you can land a majority of headshots, but on some enemies with a very small head, you are not going to be able to hit those consistently, and then again, not getting the optimal TTK to actually kill them outright. However, the range with this is actually quite nice for a sidearm, and actually able to hit shots from pretty far away and actually do quite a lot, up to 2,000 damage from pretty far, up to like 20 meters away, which honestly helps a lot more than in PvP, and just makes it so I don't feel like I'm getting kind of like outranged by even just the simplest enemies, and actually able to hold my own weight with just a sidearm. I will say, if you are running 2 other Rat Kings with it, it does help it a little bit with that fire rate potential, giving it another about half rating up, and it will increase the TTK against most enemies, and will help with some little bit of yellow bars and orange bar enemies. And then that leads us to our next section, which is going to be Nightfalls, and this is going to be given a rating of a 6. Now, the reasoning behind the rating is mostly just because it's not bad, especially when it comes to a Nightfall, when you're able to utilize the invisibility to go get a res, or to really get rid of any aggro that any enemies have on you. And it's just nice to have a little bit of breathing room, especially if you are running Graviton, because you do get that increase in visibility, so you aren't really a sitting duck for most of the Nightfall, even though you are running a sidearm. That being said, if it is a higher level Nightfall, I would be a little concerned, especially when it comes to actually getting any damage output out, because you do have to be fairly close to actually even kill the smallest enemies. So I would just run the invisibility subclass if you are running Rat King, just to help close the distance to get aggro off of you, to get that one kill and then go around and kill another one. And the damage output and any yellow bars or any bosses is quite lacking, so if you were to run a kind of a better special, I was running Ikelos shotgun during this, and it does help a lot with the damage output when it comes to actually boss fights. Once again, that being said, there are other legendary sidearms that do almost the same exact thing, but just without the perk, and a lot of exotics that are way more better than Rat King in a Nightfall setting, especially with the mods in place this season. This could be changing from season to season, so of course the rating could go up or pretty much stay the same when it comes to what mods are on that season, but I'm just going to stick it to above average just because of the perk makes it so it's not around average, and most of the time you aren't really running sidearms when it comes to nightfalls, and you are running something along the lines of an auto rifle, a pulse rifle, or something to stun the actual enemies that come at you. The only other thing I want to add is, of course, the mag size is going to make it a tad bit hard, because there are some enemies where you can load the entire clip into them and they won't give a fuck, and they will just still be standing there. So you do need to watch out. That's why I, of course, do the invisibility subclass. So if you pop invisibility, you do have that increased reload time, and you're able to reload and then go right back at it when it comes to actually giving out the damage. And then, of course, the next section is going to be Gambit. And then for this, I was going to be giving it a 6.5 out of 10, but after some reconsideration, I think that it deserves a solid 4.5. Now, the reasoning behind giving it a 0.5% and a kind of lower score is mostly just because of the PvP and the invader aspect. And if you're strictly just running Rat King, which is the majority of this video, you are getting slapped. There is no comparison when some guy invades with Truth, Gallahorn, Xenophage, and can either one-shot or two-shot you without even looking. That's a problem when it comes to Rat King. Rat King is really only supposed to be used for pretty close quarter fights as well, and most invaders are going to be either running a shotgun, fusion rifle, or something to close the distance, because they don't have to use their heavy or their sniper rifle all the time, and you are still going to be out DPS'd and killed before you're able to really kill anybody when it comes to invading. Now, with that being said, the PvE aspect, the enemy aspect, does really well, especially if you're able to, you know, if one of your teammates dies, you can again get the res off. You can defeat aggro, because Gambit is a little bit more aggressive when it comes to actual enemies, and it's just a little bit easier to kill a couple smaller enemies, reload, get that invisibility, reposition, and then able to again go back into it and get the motes. It shouldn't really get a high rating just because of the fact that the DPS is kind of booty cheeks, especially when it comes to primeval damage and any of the primeval envoys, and it's just a little lacking when it comes to actually the full Gambit experience when something compared to like Malfeasance, when Malfeasance honestly is a better kind of substitute for Rat King. And I know it's a different exotic, blah blah blah, I get it, but it's a little bit better at what it does. And then I do hate giving ratings of a half up, but I feel like it shouldn't quite get a 4 just because the PvE is kind of holding it on to a little bit of a higher rating, probably about like a 5 average, or like around like a 5.5. So I'm just gonna give it a 4.5. I feel like that's just for what it does, especially because it is quite lackluster in PvP. I'd even go as low as giving it a 3 or maybe even a 2.5. And I feel like just finding the middle ground right there is well enough. Now, in this final portion, I didn't mention in the intro, is going to be giving a rating of a fun aspect and a average rating of all the categories together, and any final outputs or anything like that will be included at the end, but it will be giving it a fun rating of an 8. Now, this may be a little biased, and I'm sorry to say, but I do run invisibility a lot more than other areas, so I do have a little bit of a niche, and I do run it a lot more, so I am able to utilize the utility around it, and of course the invisibility perks, to kind of use it effectively. And it makes it a little bit more fun because you don't have to hold on to a fight for as long, and you are able to kind of like scoot around and able to act like a little ninja per se, and not have to use your abilities to actually get said invisibility. That being said, the reason why it's not getting anything below a 7 is mostly just because of the PvE, and the control is kind of carrying it. But when it comes to, of course, comp and Gambit, you are seeing that draw down a little bit more, and it's going to be giving around like a 4, and again like around like a 3, and it just makes it so it's a little bit difficult to rate it anything higher than an 8. just because I'm not really having fun if I'm getting killed by fusion rifles every 2 seconds I go to kill somebody. That being said, we've all had groups where you want to run Rat King during a raid, and you want to run Rat King because it's kind of like a meme weapon. It's kind of fun to run, and that's fine. That's why I'm kind of giving it leniency. If you are running a team aspect, I might even put it up to a 9 to a 9.5, because who doesn't have a little bit of fun with Rat King, especially when you're with a 6 stack and can melt a lot of bosses when you just focus fire on somebody. The only problem is, since bosses are now getting harder and harder and harder and more leaning towards linear fusions, it is really hard to actually find the raids and find the encounters that you can use Rat King on effectively. But that being said, when you're actually able to use them, phenomenal. It is fun. You have fun with your teammates, you have fun with your clanmates, your friends, and it just makes the game a lot better. And then, of course, you are able to hit 51 headshot when it comes to PvP, which honestly is pretty funny, especially when it comes from a sidearm. The only issue comes with, honestly, the recoil and the fact that the gun does jump a lot and get in your crosshair placement. If you are able to keep the crosshair and like keep the momentum down, it is going to help a lot, because that 51 headshot makes the TTK better than most actual weapons. But the only problem is, I feel like, is Rat King falls a little bit behind because it is an old exotic, and with these older exotics, they get left behind in the dust by more unique and more kind of specific exotics. And I feel like they can definitely rearrange it, or kind of like buff or kind of like rework Rat King to do a little bit better damage and a little bit more range. But honestly, I wouldn't touch it at all if I were a developer myself, because it's at a nice place. And then finally, to end it all, it is going to be a average rating of a 5.9. I honestly don't even know how the fuck we got the 0.9. It's 5.9166 repeating. What the fuck even is that? Now, honestly, I think that I just dropped something. God damn it. Alright, with that being said, I feel like giving pretty much like around like a 6 as an average rating does its justice. It is slightly above average, and it actually does the job that it does. I am a little biased though when it comes to like void invisibility stuff and being able to run my build. But, you know, I feel like if a new person or like a new player to Destiny grabbed Rat King and slapped on, you know, just invisibility in general, it doesn't even have to have Graviton forfeit, they can have a lot of fun both in PvP and PvE. I wouldn't situationally like use it in higher difficulties. There are other exotics, obviously, like, I don't know, like this Lift Arbalist, you know, Galahorn, you know, you want to run fucking Jotun. If you want to be a bitch, go ahead. But I mean, if you want to run different things, run different things. This isn't really a meta weapon, and it never really was supposed to be. But I feel like it has a good enough hold in the kind of like place of Destiny right now that you can have fun with it. And then with that being said, of course, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, leave a comment. If you disagree with me, argue with me, I really don't care. You can think my scaling is ass cheeks. Go on ahead. But obviously, if you're watching this on TikTok, do check out my YouTube and Twitch channel. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go check out my TikTok. Same name for everything. And have a good night.